Welcome, Lean Machine 2. I just want to talk a little bit about the ground rules, or, well, the criteria for winning, right? So what we decided was that some people are trying to gain muscle, some people are trying to lose fat, and some people are trying to do a combination of the two. So it kind of is a little bit where it's our judgment who kind of should win. So it's not just clear cut like, hey, he lost 100 pounds, he wins. If someone, gains 50 pounds of muscle, loses 50 pounds of fat, then maybe they should win. So it's kind of a combination of who's making the most of what they have. For example, I think we had somebody that was, had a lot of fat to lose. They lost a ton of fat, but somebody else lost fat and gained muscle. However, their fat loss far exceeded anyone else's muscle gain, kind of on par with that. Does that make sense? All right. So if you're thin looking to build muscle, you still have a shot to win. Conversely, if you're really big, just losing fat doesn't mean you're going to win either. So it's kind of the same thing as last year. Some of you guys have been here already. Most of you guys did it last year. So you kind of know where I'm going to go with it. And then we'll open up for some questions. So I like to start off with just kind of like how to set up a successful program. Hierarchy of progress. So if somebody's not progressing, one of these four things is out of whack, or more than one. Do you have an underlying health issue? Women might have some thyroid issues, guys might have low T, something like that. Are you eating correctly? That's, I think, is the biggest thing. That's kind of why I do what I do. The right calories, the right amount of protein, the right fats, the right carbs before you work out. Are you creating enough stimulus? Are you making enough workouts? Are you pushing yourself in training? Lastly, you're recovering. So just crushing it every day doesn't mean you're doing a good job. You might not be recovering. I mean, there are a lot of people, it's CrossFit especially, they sometimes double sessions, but that doesn't mean you're recovering and you're progressing. Sure, you can kill it every day, but you might not be getting anywhere. You're just spinning your wheels. So one or more is missing, one of those pieces. And you should kind of figure where that is for you. Are you getting here 4 or 5 times a week? Are you pushing yourself? Check, check. Are you generally healthy? Check. Are you eating enough? Look into that. Are you recovering enough? All right, so the nuts and bolts, right? So weight loss or weight gain, it's a thermodynamics equation. Your hormonal state, if you are, let's just say you are an endurance athlete. Generally, they're kind of like, their hormonal systems are beat up because they're just doing everything so excessively. Low testosterone, metabolism's kind of shot. This formula might not work for them. Calories in, calories out, it might not work. Also, depending on the macros you eat. So there's the diet philosophy, if it fits your macros, where you can eat 100 carbs of whatever, it's still 100 carbs. That's not necessarily true. But all things being equal, if you're healthy, you're eating healthy macros, and you're not taking any supplements or pharmaceuticals to alter that, it's calories in, calories out. So if you want to lose weight, you want to eat a little less. If you want to gain weight, you want to eat a little more. Just some basics. Most people probably know this. There's 4 calories in a gram of protein and a gram of carb, and there's 9 in a gram of fat. That means fat is twice as calorically dense as protein and carbs, meaning you can only eat half as much fat as protein and carbs and still get the same amount of energy. Question? No, just couldn't see it. Hard to see, yeah. Yeah, the white. And the calorie is just a unit of measure of energy. Here's another breakdown of it. So carbs and protein have 4 calories a gram, fat has 9, alcohol has 7. So, when it comes to drinking alcohol, it's not like, oh, there's carbs in beer. Actually, alcohol is almost as calorically dense as fat. When you metabolize a fat molecule, you actually break it down to a 7, like an alcohol. So I like to equate alcohol on par with fat. So if you're going to do 15 shots, it's like 15 shots of butter. You wouldn't do that, would you? No. But the same, calorically, it's the same. 1 pound of fat is 3,600 calories. What I like to do is you want to create a little bit of a deficit with your food intake, and then you also want to create a little bit of an excess energy expenditure from your normal day-to-day activity. That could be a class, that could be intervals, that could be cardio, slow cardio. You want to get a little bit from the food and a little bit from exercise. If you get 250 from each, that's 500 a day. Times 7 days, you're going to burn 1 pound of fat a week. Any questions so far? Nope? All right. Some people that go hardcore dieting, they massive caloric cuts or they're cleaning it up, they might see that they might have lost more. Usually it's mostly water and muscle glycogen. Glycogen is the storage of carbs in your muscles. I like to use the analogy of a dry sponge on the counter and like a wet sponge. So if you fill a dry sponge up, you get it waterlogged and heavy, that's your muscle carbed up. When you go on a keto diet or no carbs, it's wringing the sponge out and letting it sit on the counter and dry. You didn't lose fat, you just lost the storage of glycogen that's in your muscles, which is mostly water weight. If you look at the numbers again, 250 and 250, if you kind of like added that up, that would be, so maybe a nice hard workout, you might burn 500 calories. You'd have to do like 7 workouts a week just to burn a pound of fat. So if you think I lost 5 pounds of fat this week, that would be like 40 workouts a week. It's not going to happen. So there's no way in hell you're going to lose more than 2 to 3 pounds of fat in a week. So any detox, any stupid gimmicky thing, it's thermodynamics. It's just not going to happen. Even if you ate 3,000 or if you ate 3 pizzas, you're not going to gain a pound of fat. So you kind of can't gain a pound of fat or lose a pound of fat in a day. It just doesn't happen. It's just water and salt fluctuation. Carbs, I like to use the expression earn your carbs. That's exactly it. People just eat them kind of, at will when you're not using them, and that's where you get into trouble. All carbs, whether they're complex, they become sugar in the blood. There's no such thing as an essential carb. You don't need carbs to live. You can do fine without them. They should be based on your activity level. Carbs are the preferred fuel source for a moderate to high level activity. So for example, any activity you do where you have to breathe out of your mouth because you're winded would be a carb-based activity. If you could jog on a treadmill and kind of just breathe out of your nose, that wouldn't be a carb-fueled activity. It would be a fat-fueled activity. So when it comes to consuming carbs, you should think about what the activity is. Are you going to walk your dog? Are you doing gardening? Are you doing a power walk around the block? All that probably could be done with your mouth closed and you could just breathe out of your nose. The minute you actually have to breathe out of your mouth to get air, it would be like a carb-based activity. So that should, send some light bulbs off in your head. If you're sitting on the couch just eating carbs all day and not doing anything, that's just storage of fat. That's just going to accumulate. Once your muscles and glycogen are topped off, it spills over and gets stored as body fat. That make sense? All right. We're going to skip this one. So when it comes to protein, I like the phrase, you are what you eat eats. So the protein you're eating, you want to know what that's been fed. This is where organic, grass-fed, things like that. If you're eating, farm-raised fish that's being fed chicken shit and soybeans, that's more or less what the protein is going to be comprised of, chicken shit and soybeans. If you're eating a cow that's roaming around a valley eating like fresh wild grass and flowers and stuff, you're going to get that as in your protein when you consume it. You need amino acids to build muscle. There's, we hear it all the time now, branched chain aminos. Oh, I drink my BCAAs. Just to clear up a little confusion, BCAAs stimulate muscle protein synthesis, but they don't build muscle. So people that walk around with a gallon jug all day, sipping BCAAs, think they're just getting huge. They're not. All you're doing is stimulating muscle protein synthesis, but it's not occurring without a stimulus, being the weight training, and then essential amino acids, which are another group of aminos. So I'm an advocate of the Intrablast because it actually has both. If you didn't want to get that, you want to look for one that's got like essential aminos, because those are what actually build muscle. And when it comes to protein, you want to make sure you're consuming enough so that you're actually going to be able to build muscle. If you're working out all the time, if the protein's not there, you're never going to build it. We've seen a nutrition label. Really, if you want to do really well, you shouldn't have anything that has a label. It should just be, your meats, veggies, anything that goes bad in a few days, it's not going to have a label. All right, you guys know I'm really big into fats, healthy fats. Your main categories are saturated, monounsaturated, and polyunsaturated. Your omegas are polyunsaturated, right? Omega-3s and 6s. Most of us get too many 6s, so you want to get more 3s. The 3s are in fish, wild fish, or fish oil. So most of us don't get nearly enough of that. Or you think, I buy my fish, I get my fish at Costco. That's farm-raised fish. It's actually not going to have omega-3s in it. It's going to have a small amount because the fish can only be made up of what it's being fed. So if it's being fed, corn and chicken shit, it's not going to have omega-3s. Saturated fats are like anything at room temperature that's solid, like butter, coconut oil. That's a saturated fat. That's an easy way to tell. Monos, I'm really big on the monos. That's avocado, macadamia nut oil, pecans, walnuts, almonds. Avocados. Those are what should be comprise the bulk of your fats that you consume. We're told in the media we should avoid saturated fats. That's what's actually clogging our arteries. That's not true. Every cell in your body is made up of a saturated fat. We need saturated fat. It's the most abundant fat in the body. Just generally, we're getting too much of it, and we're getting too much of the bad kind of saturated fat. So if you get a piece of steak, it's got fat on it, and you cook it, and it's grizzly. That kind of fat is an oxidized fat. It's kind of like a rancid fat, and then we consume that. That's what's actually bad for us, not let's say a coconut oil, which is a saturated fat that's not oxidized. GLA is a omega-6, which is an essential fatty acid. Usually the omegas are essential, meaning essential for life. That's why I'm a big fan of borage oil. Borage oil contains a high amount of GLA. GLA is really good for anti-inflammatory stuff. Sorry? Borage seed oil, and black currant seed. It's got the highest amounts of it. So you don't need much, but a little bit of it will help reduce inflammation. Borage. So we need fats. Fats actually make your hormones. So in the hormonal cascade, cholesterol is the first molecule, right? Cholesterol gets turned into something called pregnenolone. Pregnenolone is the mother hormone of all the other hormones. So from there you make testosterone, DHEA, estrogen, cortisol. So you need fats to actually make hormones. They also help nerve sheathing. Any questions on fats? Yeah.
Are all the fish oils in the store the same?
Great question. So I know they did a study a few years ago. They sampled a bunch of fish oils. They found that 98% of the ones on the market were actually rancid already, which means you're consuming an oxidized rancid fat, and it showed that their fat levels, their lipids and stuff like that got worse. So having Costco brand fish oil will make you in worse shape than having no fish oil.
What's the good one?
So Nordic Naturals is my favorite one. Carlson's is another good one. New Chapter is another one. There's a few now because I think they were kind of caught that.
Target, they have now wild caught fish oil.
That doesn't mean anything. I would really look into it, yeah. So, and what I mean is it's kind of like if you had a cell. Same thing with protein, like an egg. When you crack an egg, it's like this. It's like a glass vase. Once you start cooking it and frying it and heating it up and making it turn brown, you're starting to denature the protein, the way the cellular structure is. It's kind of like smashing a vase and then crazy gluing it back together. When you consume that, that's not good for the body. That's the same thing that happens with the fish oil or other fats that are rancid. It's like eating, it's like dirty gas for your car. It's not going to help. It's going to hurt the situation. Fruits and veggies. Vegetables have everything fruit has except without the sugar. There's a couple, some veggies have a little bit of sugar in them, beets. My catchphrase for those are eat the rainbow. All vegetables are good. You don't want to just stick to one color. Lots of colored stuff, greens. You want your orange, yellow, red, even some purple stuff. Vegetables have all your nutrients, minerals, phytonutrients, polyphenols, and antioxidants. That's kind of like the bulk of where you're going to get them from. They also contain fiber. Fiber keeps your digestive tract healthy, prevents constipation. Fiber is also food for your gut bacteria. Perfect timing. So, yeah. So your digestive tract is really where everything starts. It's the first line of defense for your immune system. Your digestive tract has like thousands of different species of bacteria. Probiotics are bacteria. Just like I said, there are thousands of species in your body. When you get a probiotic in the store, typically it's got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 of them, but there's thousands. And we are like just scratching the surface on like what each one does. I think we have like 1% of bacterial probiotic species like mapped out. So, you know, we know that they're beneficial. We know that they can help some people, but it's still like just scratching the surface. So if somebody kind of tells you otherwise, it's not true. It's just, I mean, they can be helpful. It's really good for if you have like bad bacteria, bad gut bugs. You went to a foreign country, you got dysentery, and you haven't been right since. Chances are you have like a bad gut bug that's really throwing off the environment in your gut. I kind of use the analogy of the movie Avatar, where like everything's connected, and this one is in unison with that one, and they're just this, you know, big harmonious living, you know, macrocosm. So your gut wants to be the same thing. The species all kind of live in unison or helping each other. However, there are bad gut bugs that'll just throw stuff off, and that's when you have loose stools constantly. You're running to the bathroom. That's where a lot of irritable bowel starts. And when you have irritable bowel, you run to your gastro. They scope you and they say, you're fine. But meanwhile, you've been having diarrhea for 6 months. It's usually because of a gut issue, like a bacterial gut issue, not because there's actually something structurally wrong with you. But a GI doctor won't see that. Yeah, I'm not a fan of it because it's like unregulated. They just kind of grow bacteria in tea, and they're like, yeah, it's bacteria, it's a probiotic. But it's actually, there's some studies on it, it's actually killed people because they don't know what they're growing. So, and people are just consuming it like willy-nilly, like, oh, it's cool. But you're consuming bacteria that you don't necessarily need.
What about that VSL-3? It's like a refrigerated probiotic.
That's the new incarnation of it is called Visbiome. That's my favorite. I think it's got 6 strains of bacteria in it that are actually researched, and they know kind of what it does. So that's actually my favorite one, and the only one I recommend. Visbiome, yeah. It's not cheap. It's like $100 for a 30-day supply. But that's for somebody with like irritable bowel, like straight up irritable bowel. Candida is a yeast overgrowth of your digestive tract. We all have yeast in our stomachs. It's just to what degree. If you are someone that has like incessant sugar cravings, you get bloated and gassy when you eat carbs, or you always craving carbs, or if you've had any issues with yeast in the past, chances are you might have a Candida overgrowth. All right, calculating macros. Some of the nuts and bolts.
You're going to send us this, right?
Yeah, I'm taking a video, Rob. You just asked me.
On the video?
Yes.
Oh, this sounds powerful.
What you see now, you're going to get.
All right. So these are the kind of the numbers that have been out a while. These are kind of where I hone in. Protein, right? So you want to have 1 to 1.5 grams of protein per pound of lean muscle, right? So you want to once we do your body fat, we'll see how much fat you have, how much lean muscle. You want to calculate macros based on the lean muscle. That's actually what's functioning, what's actually doing work. Your fat is just going along for the ride. Healthy fats, we need them 0.3 to 0.6 grams per pound. Your carbs, back to earning them, they should be based on your activity, right? So, and your body fat percentage. So for example, let's just say you're super active, but your body fat's really high. Chances are you should really keep your carbs lower to kind of really break down some of that body fat. Also, the higher your body fat goes, the worse you tolerate carbohydrates. Guys that are very lean and thinner can actually handle a ton of carbohydrates, and they actually will utilize them better. So a carb recommendation for really is kind of subjective, but based on your lean muscle, be 0.5 to 3 grams. If you're super lean and you're a hard gainer, you never gain a pound, you want to be closer to that 3 gram. Or if you're a real big guy and you're having trouble losing, you want to be close to the low end, 0.5. Any questions with those so far? Everybody understand that? One thing to add to that, I use the cutoff of 10% body fat for leaning and gaining. So everyone says, oh, when should I bulk up or when should I cut down? When your body fat creeps up above 10, your ability to handle carbohydrates and how you manage your insulin gets worse. So if you were to bulk up above 10% body fat and you gain 10 pounds, most of it will probably be fat and a small amount will be muscle. Conversely, if you're under 10% body fat and you gain 10 pounds, most of it will be muscle and a small portion will be fat. So it's all kind of dependent on where your body fat level is. So some of these guys that, meatheads that come in and they're bulky to begin with, they want to keep bulking up, you're just going to get fatter. It's just going to keep, your ability to build muscle will decrease and you're not going to use those carbs that well and you're just going to increase your fat. Some general recommendations, right? Most active females, somewhere between 50 to 150 grams a day should be your carb intake. And then guys, somewhere from 75 to 250. Real big guys, again, that are having trouble losing should probably be on the low end. And then guys that have a hard time gaining or, they're running out of energy. Remember too, if you're on a weight loss diet, your workout probably is gonna suffer a little. You don't wanna have like a massive, decrease in strength, but you're probably gonna feel it. You know what, I'm a little tired near the end of the workout, whereas before I was killing it. And if you're a guy looking to, bulk up and put some muscle on, you should be well fueled through the whole workout. You should not be getting tired or crashing at the end. If you are, you probably need a little bit more carbs. Fiber, that's important. Recommendations, 25 grams for females, 38 for men. A cup of broccoli has like 2 grams. So that will tell you you're going to need a ton of veggies to get your fiber intake for the day. Yep.
Is the carbs net?
Sorry?
Is the carbs net? Is it net carbs?
Is what net carbs?
Is,
Yeah, that doesn't count. Yeah, veggies don't count into that. Yeah.
even beans, like beans have the high.
Yeah, beans would count. Beans also should come from if you're going to consume beans, you're going to take the protein amount away from your protein consumption. Beans have like probably 60 to 70% carb, 20 to 30% protein in them. Some fat loss guidelines. You should be losing 1 to 2 pounds a week. If you are, leaner guy, it might be a half to 1 pound if you're kind of dialed in right. If you're losing faster than that, we just kind of talked about it, chances are it's not fat. It's going to be water, or you might be, if you're going too hard, you might be losing some muscle. Your meals should be made up of protein, veggies, healthy fat, and your carbs eaten around the workout. I need an example here. Maybe like somebody like Rob, he might need to eat, 2 meals of carbs might not be enough for him. He might need to eat like 3 meals, possibly 4 meals of carbs to kind of stay fueled for the day. Whereas somebody else that has higher body fat might get away. Maybe they just need to eat one pre-workout meal loaded with carbs to kind of fuel them, but then that's it. And then the rest of the day they're working on like losing fat. The key is managing your insulin. One of the slides earlier I skipped on. If you're eating carbs all day, you're going to get an increase in blood sugar. Your body wants to correct that, so it's going to secrete insulin to pull it out. It pulls the blood sugar out, and it's either going to put it in the muscle if you're low on glycogen, or it's going to store it as fat if your glycogen levels are full. So if you're sitting on the couch all week eating carbs, chances are your glycogen levels are full because you're not doing anything. So a lot of that carb is going to get stored as body fat. Conversely, if you are working out constantly, you're constantly depleting down that muscle glycogen, your body's going to store carbs back in the muscle to kind of fill it back up. You kind of want to walk that fine line of staying balanced, not having too much, not having too little. If you eat carbs all day, you're going to spike up your insulin. That process is going to keep occurring. That's why I like carbs just around workouts, especially for people who are trying to lean out, because the rest of the day you can kind of burn fat as opposed to spiking. Anytime you're going to have a blood glucose spike, you're going to inhibit fat loss. So if you're just consuming carbs all day, chances are you're never in a spot to really burn fat. For those that want to gain weight, a half a pound to 1 pound a week. It's not all going to be muscle, it's just not possible, but you need to have some way to measure your excess food intake, right? So if you weigh yourself every Friday and the scale's not going up, you're plain and simple not eating enough to gain muscle. You have to have an excess. With that excess, you're gonna gain a little body fat, but you have to have it there to gain some muscle. You want to focus on getting that scale to keep moving. Your meals should be the same thing: protein, fat, veggies, and carbs. More of your meals are going to be carbs. I think I talked about this last year with food labels. If you're eating something and it says 0 grams of fat, you're like, oh, this is great. You know, I can eat a ton of this, and you start eating a ton of it. If you look at the label, it might just say soybean oil in it or something like that, but it said 0 fat. It's not possible. What they'll do is they'll shrink the serving size to get the amount of fat in a serving below 1, like it could be 0.9, and then they're allowed to put 0 on the label. So if you consume, something, let's say a whole box of Snackwells, whatever, it's got 0 fat, but really has 0.9 and it's 15 servings, you just consumed like 15 grams of fat, but you think you didn't. So that's one of their tricks in the industry. Same thing like with sugar. Sugar could be like 0.9 and they put 0, but really there's sugar in it. So you really want to look at the label and see what's in it. That's going to tell you. So another good one is somebody, I'll say, hey, have almonds, and they ate some almonds. They're like roasted in oil, and they also have like salt added. That oil is going to be on the label, but it's not going to be written on the ingredients, the amounts. This is getting to organic stuff, grass-fed, grain-fed. So a cattle that's given grains, right, it's going to have, if it's given corn or soybean because it's cheap, that's what most of the content's going to be comprised of. Whereas like a grass-fed cow is going to be roaming around the prairie eating whatever it wants. Same thing like chickens. I'm a big fan of pasture-raised chicken. A pasture-raised chicken is the chicken that's running around the pasture eating insects, worms, as opposed to a chicken that's in a coop being force-fed cheap feed. So usually the cheaper the meat, it's because it's fed something cheap. It's cost effective to feed them cheap stuff. And that's what you're going to be putting in your body, as opposed to a chicken or an animal that's fed its natural diet in the wild. It will be much better composition of fat, protein, etc. Exercise. So HIIT, right? Most of CrossFit is like a HIIT style. This tends to burn a massive amount of carbohydrates. It also increases lactic acid levels, which will increase growth hormone levels. Growth hormone helps us to mobilize fat. Strength training. You want to keep building muscle as much as you can. The more muscle you gain, the more calories you can burn and consume. Slow cardio list, that's a low intensity, steady state. That's just kind of, slow brainless cardio where you're breathing out of your nose. That also burns calories, but it burns fat directly. That's why, bodybuilders that do cardio, or everyone does cardio thinking they're burning fat. Yes, it burns fat directly as a fuel because it's low intensity, like we talked about earlier, but it's much more, it's less effective than strength training. Strength training burns more total calories per minute than, let's just say, low intensity. Strength training burns carbs, low intensity cardio burns fat. So they work by two different mechanisms, but strength training is more effective calorically, burning total calories. Does that make sense? All right. That's, it's like exercise post energy expenditure. Calories after, so when you do a workout, I don't know if you get a massive, like you're starving for the rest of the day, that's because your body has this massive metabolic rate increase. So you want food, your body wants food, so that's what EPOC is. So that's why they say HIIT is great because it burns calories throughout the rest of the day. Your metabolic rate stays elevated. Whereas with low intensity, it doesn't. When you're done with the cardio or walking your dog or whatever, that's just it. There's no kick. When do you eat? I would just say the most important time, I mean, guys that are working out super early, I know you're kind of like rolling out of bed and coming, go up, there's something in your system to kind of go. That's the best way to manage that. In a perfect world, I would eat like 2 hours before you come to the gym, at least 90 minutes. And that meal should be, like fat, protein, and carbs. We'll find out how much you should eat once we do your macros. The meals kind of doesn't matter if you want to have 2 a day, 6 a day. I think somewhere around, like 4. If you're a really tiny girl, maybe like 3. If you're a super big guy, maybe like 5. I'd say somewhere between like 4 is probably 4 to 5 is probably really good for everybody. It's really based on your preference. Eating more doesn't do anything other than, a little bit more of an inconvenience each day. It's just that for somebody that's really big that needs to hit, let's say 300 grams of protein a day, it's hard to eat, 10 ounces of meat multiple times. Then you might want to break it up into, 6-ounce meals. So we talked about this a little bit already. I like to get the carbs in your system. I mean, if anybody's played around with it, in my opinion, getting like 2 to 3 meals in your system before you train, I think you're like most productive. If you have kind of less than that, you may run out of energy a little bit. And like the people that work out fasted all the time, I feel great, I don't eat anything. I think you're just so used to it, but like if you actually started fueling yourself, you might have a much, bigger increase in strength and performance. You kind of just get used to what you've been doing. The shake, if you early morning guys are going to do the shake, I would just kind of like sip it as you go. I wouldn't pound it and then come running in. I would just sip it as you train. Yeah.
So you do, like the morning workouts, you have an entry class,
Yeah.
super carb.
Yeah.
And during the workout,
Yeah.
is that considered a meal?
I would consider that a meal, yeah. I actually, if I were to set up your plan, I would just count the carbs as carbs for the day. I wouldn't count the protein as protein for the day. But that's just also too, aminos are protein, if you didn't know. So people like that, for years I would recommend Intrablast, and they would say, well, where's the protein? That's what aminos are, the protein.
What if you vomited all up during the workout?
Then you got to eat again.
Infamous.
And even if you're like waking up and you got a 20-minute drive here, if it doesn't affect your workout in a bad way, like meaning you're nauseous or you throw it up, I think that's fine. I don't really think it's getting in your system. Like you're going to be digesting it as you train. So if you have like 3 rice cakes and a protein shake on the way here, that's actually not really going to be in you helping you as you train. Sure, you can eat it and probably get away with it and be fine, but. So long-term success, it's changing your habits, really. That's where it's going to boil down to. This isn't like a gimmick. This isn't something you do. This is kind of really how you should eat. Once you kind of get dialed in, this is what you should be doing. There's nothing sneaky. There's nothing quick weight loss. There's nothing. This is just it. This is how you set up your food. Maybe this isn't how your grandmother taught you to eat. Maybe this isn't how your parents taught you to eat, but this is how you fuel yourself, really. Half of our problems with food are psychological problems. It has nothing to do with, it's just we're stressed, we're edgy, we're this, we're that. It's where all the problems come in. We're making it a mental thing, not just a fuel source. You can lose weight just dieting without exercise, but the exercise actually will keep it off long term. If you consistently drop calories, that's only going to get you so far, and you're going to kind of run the problems. But exercising and keeping your metabolic rate up for the long term will do better. Will keep you keep the weight off. Now implementing, this is the big thing, meal prepping. I mean, really, that's what you have to do. To be eating this out all the time, you're going to run into problems. You're going to run into problems if you don't have food. If you're, I got to eat, I have nothing ready, you're going to order out, you're going to make a bad choice. So kind of staying ahead of it is what's going to, keep you successful. Food shopping, food in the fridge, food in the freezer, ready to go, meals ready. What am I going to eat? It's there. You're on the road, it's in the cooler in the back seat. It shouldn't be like, well, what do I do if I'm at work? You should be bringing your meals to work. It's like anything. If you want to succeed at it, you do all the things you have to do that. Buy in bulk, store Tupperware, glass Tupperware, not plastic, never heating any plastic. That's why men have half the testosterone of their grandfathers. Prepared foods, you just want to make sure you know what's in it. I wouldn't be buying frozen stuff and like ShopRite and stuff. Maybe a reputable meal prep company.
Kettlebell Kitchen.
Kettlebell Kitchen.
Okay.
Flattering that you know we're right.
This is like, you know, kindergarten stuff, but you know, in the supermarket, just stay out of the middle, right? You want to follow where all the refrigeration is, where all the stuff that goes bad. The middle's where you get into trouble, all the packaged crap. Coolers, Tupperware, ice packs, all that. That's what's going to keep you on track. Supplements, I think for most people, a multi, I don't think everyone gets all their, you know, vitamins, minerals. I think a good multi is important. Everyone is up here is deficient in vitamin D. It's just where we live. So I think a vitamin D supplement's good. Super Carb Intrablast, you know, I think you can get away without having it, but I think for maybe the morning guys, I think it's going to help the most. If you get like super sore, I think it alleviates some soreness. If you are a guy that just runs through food like crazy, like Frankie can eat anything, doesn't gain a pound, he's a guy that probably should have like intra-workout where he's just getting those calories in as he's training. You know, thinner people, if you're running out of gas during the workout, those would be good for you. As far as protein shakes, you don't need them. If you're eating foods and you're eating them in the right amount, you don't need a supplement. You don't need a shake. It does nothing. If you're having a whey protein shake or a chicken breast, there's no difference. However, if you are going to have a shake just for convenience, middle of the day, you know, you're in your office, you can't get up and eat a meal, but you want to have like a shake. I'm a big fan of the plant protein. And the reason is that anyone that's had whey protein shakes for more than 3 months, which is probably like all of us, we probably all have a whey protein sensitivity. So, and most proteins on the market are shit. So you want to rotate proteins. The things you eat the most, chances are the ones you have food sensitivities towards. So if you eat eggs every day, Frankie found out he has a food sensitivity to eggs. And that's true for anybody for the most part. If you know, whatever you're consuming the most of, chances are you have a sensitivity to, which can also lead to constipation, diarrhea. Gluten-free, we know gluten-free only matters if you have a gluten sensitivity. There's only 2 kinds, celiacs, like 1% of the population has it. And the other one is a non-celiac gluten sensitivity, like 2% of the population have that. So while everything we see out there is gluten-free, 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 really only 3% of the population have a problem with gluten. So chances are you don't.